Hello, this is Sarah Brosh. Welcome back to my channel. So I want to do a video. I'm going to do a couple quick videos tonight because it's pretty late, but I wanted to get a couple videos out. The first video I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Sarah Palin's defamation lawsuit against the New York Times. So it went to trial. And there was a sort of huge melee yesterday because the judge said that he was going to throw out the lawsuit before he even allowed it to get to the jury. Now, I suspect that because there was such an uproar about him making, and I believe it's a gentleman, a man, him making this announcement that he wasn't even going to allow the jury to consider the merits of the lawsuit, the defamation lawsuit, the libel lawsuit against the New York Times by Sarah Palin, that he did, in fact, today allow it to go to the jury. Now, Sarah Palin lost, but I'm not at all discouraged by the fact that she lost. I believe that that she will continue this fight for justice, and I believe that she will take it all the way to SCOTUS, all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. And so have been very interested in this lawsuit and have been following it fairly closely. Now, basically, what the defamation lawsuit is about is the New York Times published a piece that basically accused Sarah Palin of having incited the shooting of Gabby Giffords. I believe that is what the lawsuit is about. And the reason why it's so important to me is because, well, Sarah Palin obviously is a public figure, right? And obviously I abhor the New York Times. The New York Times defines fake news press. The New York Times almost got me killed. The New York Times basically led the Get Sarah Brosh Killed Black Trauma Moral Outrage industry. The New York Times led the global defamation and vilification campaign against me that almost got me killed and destroyed my lifelong human and civil rights academic and legal careers. They did this at the behest of the Yale administration. I now believe that I have strong reason to believe that the pieces that came out basically on the same day or the next day as the actual Living or Not Being More Black hate crime hoax that took place at Yale on May 8th, 2018. I believe that these were prepared ahead of time. I don't believe that there's any way that they could have gotten those out so quickly. I believe that those pieces were prepared ahead of time, that they meant to help Yale president Peter Salovey get me killed, drive me to suicide, destroy me, destroy my life, which they did, destroy my livelihood, which they did, destroy my reputation, which they did. So the New York Times has fully embraced the Sean Cain / The Appeal style Twitter race hustler business model. I will do other videos about this. I want to do a video specifically about this business model that has been embraced not only by the New York Times, but by the entire US press. And it is a race to the bottom. It is a race to make as much Black trauma moral outrage industry money by publishing as much, sensationalized and grossly defamatory clickbait as you can before they destroy themselves. And it is a race to the bottom. It is the race to the demise of the free press in the United States. So, the New York Times basically right now, because of the landmark Supreme Court ruling in New York Times v. Sullivan and what is happening right now. And Sarah Palin obviously is a public figure. There's no doubt about that. But what is happening right now is that because of New York Times v. Sullivan, which must be revisited, the New York Times and the entire fake news press has carte blanche to wantonly destroy the lives of private citizen nobodies for moral outrage industry money. And they can do this with impunity because of New York Times v. Sullivan and the definition of a public figure. So what's happening is that you would think, well, shouldn't I be able to just sue them for defamation for what they did to me? And that should be really easy for me to do, right? And people should be lining up to help me do this because it's so obvious that the New York Times grossly and repeatedly defamed me and destroyed my life, destroyed my human and civil rights career, destroyed my reputation, almost got me killed, drove me into hiding. I was deluged by death and rape threats. I still am. All of these horrible things that happened. I almost died many times over. So you would think, shouldn't the ACLU be like at my, beck and call, begging to represent me in my, defamation lawsuit against the New York Times? Well, you would think that that would be happening, but obviously that's not happening. A big part of the reason is because, well, the ACLU has also embraced, I'll do in other videos about this, the Sean King, the appeal style Twitter race hustler business model, fully embraced that business model. The ACLU is a Black trauma, moral outrage industry unto themselves. But so what happens, the reason why the New York Times can get away with what they did to me is because all they have to do is pretend that that it's a legit, that what happened at Yale, the Living or Not Being While Black hate crime hoax at Yale, perfectly obvious. It was an utter non-event, non-crime, non-event, the least newsworthy thing that happened on, May 8th, 2018 was what happened at Yale at 2 a.m. The least newsworthy thing on the planet is what happened during that hate crime hoax, perfectly obvious hate crime hoax. And so all the New York Times has to do is they have to pretend that it's a legitimate news story and that it's a matter of public interest when Twitter race hustler Sean King posts an out-of-context snippet of iPhone camera video of a private citizen nobody, preferably a white woman with seeming or obvious mental health disabilities, and preferably a white woman without the resources to fight back and defend herself. So the whole goal is to destroy the life and hopefully drive to suicide a private citizen nobody, hopefully a white woman, a Karen, and you distort this and grossly twist it into a Karen gone wild, viral video. So you want to do this so that you can make as much Black trauma moral outrage industry money as you can. And so you want to attack a private citizen nobody who is not going to have the resources and the wherewithal to fight back. This is what you want. So, and then the way you get away with this is by saying that innocent private citizen nobody, whose life you're destroying, whom you're trying to get killed and drive to suicide, what you do is you pretend that whatever this snippet of video is of, this snippet of out of context, probably edited, grainy, camera phone video, whatever this video is of, you pretend that it's an egregious racist hate crime, and you accuse this private citizen nobody of having perpetrated an egregious, gross, racist hate crime. So hopefully you'll get them killed or you'll drive them to suicide. You certainly want to subject them to social death. You want to, vilify them. You want to, castigate them as like a Pol Pot figure, genocidal villain. And you do this by pretending that whatever this video is of, that it's a legitimate news story, that it's a matter of public interest. And then you say that this private citizen, innocent private citizen, nobody without the resources to defend themselves, that you say that they're an involuntary public figure because and you pretend that whatever this video is of, that it's a matter of public interest and that it's a legitimate news story. And this has been happening over and over and over again, in particular in the past 3 or 4 years since the advent of the Living While Black movement, which was inspired by the Me Too movement. And I was obviously one of the first victims. And so I was, subjected to, cancel culture and trial by Twitter without due process, and basically just completely destroyed. My life was completely destroyed by, the Yale administration, of course, the fake news press, the ACLU, the New York Times, obviously, the entire Black trauma moral outrage industry, and, and social media moral outrage mobs. And so, and everyone tried to cash in, right? Everyone tried to cash in and build, their Sean King, the Appeal style, Twitter race hustler, social media career on my back, off of the destruction of my life by trying to get me killed. And in particular, the Appeal did this and Sean King did this. Sean King played a major role in the Living or Napping While Black hate crime hoax at Yale, as did the Appeal, as did the ACLU, as did former president of the Appeal, which is now dead in the water, thank goodness, it's defunct. I'll do other videos about that. But the former president, Josie Duffy Rice, former the Appeal affiliate, that guy named Tennille, attorney Rebecca Kavanaugh, she was one of the absolute worst. I am preparing a whole blog post with all of her tweets about me, in the 2 years following the May 8th, 2018 obvious hate crime hoax at Yale, up until the George Floyd killing that happened on May 25th, 2020, the same day as the Christian Cooper, Amy Cooper Central Park incident, Living While Black incident, which really turned out to be a race hoax, happened. So anyway, so my point is that this is the business model. This Sean King, the Appeal, Twitter race hustler business model that has been fully embraced by the New York Times, right? And so what they do is they pretend that I'm an involuntary public figure because they pretend that this utter non-event is a matter of public interest and a legitimate news story. And this has been happening over and over and over in the past 3 or 4 years. Innocent people are killing themselves. They're committing suicide. Innocent lives are being destroyed. Newsweek did it when they pretended that miscreant who made a TikTok video of her little old white lady busybody neighbor who didn't like her Tigger flag, and she was Tigger flag Karen, and Newsweek pretended that this was a legitimate news story. Everyone pretended that it was a legitimate news story when Sean King posted the, snippet of out of context iPhone camera video of me at Yale at, 2 a.m. standing in the threshold of my own doorway where I had an absolute, expectation of privacy. Anyway, so you might think, well, what does Sarah Palin's case have to do with me then? Because she's obviously a public figure, right? And so the whole thing that New York Times v. Sullivan made it really, really difficult for anyone who is a public figure to basically, sue for defamation. They made it really, really difficult because you have to show actual malice, which means that you have to prove that, like Sarah Palin has to prove that the New York Times knew that their statement about her was false, or that they were reckless about the truth or falsity of the statement. Now, I think that even in Sarah Palin's case, I don't, I don't know how what all of the evidence that she has, all of the proof that she has, but to me, I think it's obvious that at the very least, the New York Times was grossly reckless about the falsity of that statement. I think they probably knew it was false. Certainly in my case, the New York Times knew they were lying about me, absolutely 100% knew they were lying about me. I believe I have very good reason to believe that they were doing this at the behest of Yale President Peter Salovey, at the behest of the Yale administration. They 100% knew that they were lying about me. So they weren't just reckless about it. Like, they were purposefully trying to get me killed, trying to destroy my life on behalf and at the behest of the Yale administration, and in particular, Yale President Peter Salovey. So, so I think that is just a no-brainer. But the problem is proving it in a court of law, and also for someone like me, and this is a big part of the reason why they go after, vulnerable people with mental health disabilities. They go after poor people who don't have the resources. They go after private citizen nobodies and attack them and exploit them and try to get them killed and destroy their lives. An entity like the New York Times is because it's really difficult and really expensive to sue anybody for anything, especially one of the most powerful, and wealthiest institutions in the world, like me trying to go after Yale right now. I'm just pursuing a Freedom of Information Act request. I'm just trying to get Yale, and then my wonderful attorneys at Randazza Legal Group have been amazing. I'm trying to get Yale to give me the police body cam footage of me only from the hate crime hoax at Yale on May 8th, 2018. And I currently, and this is just a fraction of how much I've spent, and most of this has been raised by donations, but I've also spent a good deal of my own earnings on this. I currently have a $25,000 legal bill, and that's just for my Freedom of Information Act request. So that I'm pursuing in the courts, and I'm in the middle of another appeal. Randazza Legal Group, my wonderful attorneys, Jay Woolman and Mark Randazza, are fighting Yale, to restore due process and equal protection and police accountability and transparency at Yale as I speak. So just imagine how difficult it would be for me to sue the New York Times for defamation. This is why the New York Times specifically and explicitly and pointedly and purposefully goes after private citizen nobodies to attack and destroy and get killed. So this is why New York Times v. Sullivan, the Supreme Court ruling that basically gives the New York Times carte blanche to destroy the lives of private citizen nobodies like me. And they're destroying themselves, okay? But I don't care if they destroy themselves, but they destroyed my life, and they need to be held accountable for that. So it's incredibly difficult. New York Times v. Sullivan makes it incredibly difficult because the New York Times just says I'm a public figure, and then somehow magically I become a public figure. And also what they do is that if I do anything to try to defend myself, to try to save my life, to try to save my career in the public sphere, if I try to go to the press, if I have a YouTube channel, if I have a blog, because I'm trying to save myself, I'm trying to save my life, then they say, oh, well, you made yourself a public figure. No, I should be able to try to save my life without that making me a public figure for the purposes of a defamation lawsuit, right? I should be able to do that without that making me a public figure for the purposes of a defamation lawsuit. And you know what? You don't get to make me a public figure and then say that I am one. And that's what the New York Times did to me. So this is why the New York Times v. Sullivan must be revisited, especially the definition of public figure, because the lives of innocent private citizen nobodies are being destroyed. Innocent private citizen nobodies are committing suicide. This is a huge problem. We're also destroying ourselves, our legal system, our constitutional principle of due process and equal protection. They are both being destroyed by trial by Twitter without due process. But so what am I hoping happens with Sarah Palin's defamation lawsuit against the New York Times? I hope she keeps fighting. I hope she keeps fighting. I hope she takes it all the way to the Supreme Court. What I am ultimately hoping for, I understand Sarah Palin actually is a public figure, but what I'm hoping for is that at least in what is called Dicta, the Supreme Court will address the definition of public figure, especially as it relates to someone like me. And I'm hoping that in Dicta, they will say that it is not okay for an entity like the New York Times to pretend that a completely private citizen nobody is an involuntary public figure, to pretend that it's a legitimate news story when someone makes a TikTok video of their little old white lady busybody neighbor, to pretend that it's a legitimate news story and that it's a matter of public interest when Sean Cain, Twitter race hustler, an evil demon, Sean Cain, or The Appeal, which thank God the Appeal is dead. It's defunct, it's over. They're trying to revive it and it needs to stay dead. I'll do other videos about that. But for the New York Times to pretend that it's a legitimate news story so that they can make Black trauma moral outrage industry money as a fake news press by purposefully targeting vulnerable people without resources to defend themselves. And they mean to destroy these private citizen nobodies. They mean to drive them to suicide. And they are pretending that, that these are legitimate news stories when they are not. They are pretending that these private citizen nobodies are involuntary public figures when they are not. Kara Swisher of the New York Times absolutely lied. She absolutely lied on Monica Lewinsky's HBO documentary on cancel culture. She claimed that she's held, as a journalist at the New York Times, that she's held to a higher standard than a Sean Cain style Twitter race hustler is. And she's not. She's not. She's held to the same standard as the Sean Cain, The Appeal style Twitter race hustler is. The exact same standard. She's held to the exact same standard. And she is protected by New York Times v. Sullivan, and she has carte blanche to destroy the lives of a private citizen nobody like me for Black trauma moral outrage industry money. And all she has to do is pretend that it's a legitimate news story when someone posts a TikTok video of their little old white lady busybody neighbor who doesn't like their Tigger flag. And that's the truth. So what I'm hoping happens is that Sarah Palin's defamation lawsuit against the New York Times goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and I'm hoping for Dicta. So what Dicta means is that the Supreme Court addresses an issue that is relatively peripheral and ancillary to the main, to the ruling in the case, but it's still something that they want to address, and it still can be cited in subsequent cases as persuasive authority. So what I'm hoping for is I'm hoping Sarah Palin takes her defamation lawsuit against the New York Times all the way to the Supreme Court, and I'm hoping that the Supreme Court, seeing the need, seeing what is happening as a matter of public policy, seeing the need to address the definition of public figure and the gross abuse by the fake news press of the definition of public figure in New York Times v. Sullivan, and seeing the need to address that in dicta, and then that will become persuasive authority, that it's not part of the ruling of the case, but it's not, it's not dispositive, but it's persuasive authority that can be cited in subsequent cases. And that is what I am hoping for. That is my hope. And thank you, Sarah Palin, because you are not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for me, you're fighting for everyone who has been abused and their innocent lives destroyed, and who have already committed suicide, or, almost committed suicide like me, almost died many times over because of what the New York Times did to me. They have to be held accountable. We have to stop the bloodshed. And the New York Times, as a defines fake news press, and they destroyed the Living While Black movement. They destroyed the Living While Black movement by turning it into a race hoax and a blood sport, targeting and demonizing vulnerable white women, and they have to be held accountable for what they did to me and for what they did to so many others, and for all of the innocent lives that they've destroyed, purposely and purposefully destroyed. And they're protected. They're hiding behind New York Times v. Sullivan, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop. It's a real problem. We're destroying ourselves. We're destroying ourselves. So anyway, I'll stop there. I don't want this video to get too long, but I will make more videos on this subject for sure. But thank you, Sarah Palin. Keep fighting for justice. Take your defamation lawsuit against the New York Times all the way to the Supreme Court. Please do that. All right, I'll talk to you later.